अष्टप्रियेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भागवते उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवतिर्नैष्टिकी ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। मुखं करोति वाचालं पंगं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुदीनतारणं परमानन्दं माधवम्। Last week we had started our discussion on chapter 26, canto 3, the fundamental principles of material nature. And we had done the first 3 verses, which essentially were introducing us to the benefits of listening to Sankhya. One gets an understanding of the nature of the material world, entanglement, and how to unentangle oneself. We'll start with verse 3. Anadirātmā purusho nirgunaha prakrite paraha pratyagdhama swayam jyotir vishvam yena samanvitam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Supreme Soul, and He has no beginning. He is transcendental to the material modes of nature and beyond the existence of this material world. He is perceivable everywhere because He is self-effulgent. And by His self-effulgent luster, the entire creation is maintained. So in 6 verses, from 3 to 8, Lord Kapila will describe the interactions and the characteristics of Jiva, Prakriti, and Purusha. And in this, he is obviously describing the nature of Purusha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So before he describes the nature of the soul, Lord Kapila is describing the nature of the super soul. And this is so that one does not get confused between the two. And the reason the confusion could happen is because there is qualitative similarity. They are both eternal, they are both pure spirit, transcendental to matter, they are both conscious. So a lot of similarity. So Lord Kapila first wants to talk about that which makes the spirit, which is the Supreme Lord, unique. So in this verse, he gives 8 characteristics of the Lord. So he says that he is Atma. Atma in this context means that he is pure spirit. He is Purusha, that he is the original enjoyer. Purusha also means that he is a person. Then Anadir, without a beginning. Nirguna, he has no material qualities. Nirguna also means that he does not change, he is never destroyed, he is without end. Then he is Pratyagdham, that he is perceived everywhere as consciousness. Pratyagdham also means, Pratyag is another name of the Karan Sagar, the causal ocean. So Pratyagdham also means that one who resides in the causal ocean. Then Prakrite Para. So this we are familiar with. Prakrite Para means that he is somebody who is beyond the material world, or one who is beyond material senses. then he is Swayam Jyotir, self-effulgent or self-manifesting, which means that he does not depend on anything else. And he is Vishwasena Samanvitam, from whom the Vishwam is the universe, Samanvitam, manifests. So the other qualities can be applied to the soul. The soul is also Atma, soul is also Purusha. He's not the ultimate enjoyer, but also an enjoyer. He's also Anadir, Nirgunir. He's also Pratyagdham. The soul is existing everywhere. The soul is not always Prakriti Para. In the conditioned state, it is within the modes, and in the liberated stage, it is beyond. So this is one where the soul may or may not be, but the last two are exclusively for the Lord, that he is Swayam Jyotir. And he is not dependent on anyone else. The soul is dependent on the Lord, and Vishwam Yena Samanvitam. And it is from him that the universes manifests. He is the one who owns the material creation. Verse 4. Saesha prakritim sukshamam devim gunamayim vibhu yadacheva pagatam abhyapatya talilaya. As his pastime, that Supreme Personality of Godhead, the greatest of the great, accepted the subtle material energy, which is invested with the three material modes of nature and which is related with Vishnu. So further characteristics are described, that the Paramatma contacts the Prakriti by his own will, since it is his own energy. So him accepting Prakriti is a pastime when he desires to create the universe. For the jivas, accepting the Prakriti is compulsion. It's not a pastime. The jivas accept Prakriti forced by karma. They cannot say that maybe I won't take birth, or maybe I will take birth as such and such, because they are being inexorably driven by the cycle of karma. But the Lord, even though he appears in material nature, but the difference is accepting it by his own will. So that is the difference between Krishna taking birth and Jiva taking birth, even though externally it may look the same. Srila Prabhupada says that Gunamayim in the verse is significant. Devim means that it is the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Gunamayim means invested with the three modes of material nature. So when the divine energy of the Lord is invested with the modes of material nature, it acts in two ways. It acts as an energy of the Lord to fulfill his desires. It also acts to cover the Lord. And Prabhupada is talking about this because this is something that will be talked about more so later in the chapter, when the process of creation will be described. Okay, next verse 5. Guner vichritaha srajatim sarupaha prakritim prajaha Vilokya mumhe sadya sahiya jnana bhuya sahiha jnana guhaya. Divided into varieties by threefold modes, material nature creates the forms of the living entities. And the living entities seen thus are illusioned by the knowledge covering feature of the illusory energy. So the previous verse had described how the Lord interacts with both the material nature as a pastime. Here it is described that the modes of material nature overpower the jiva. So this verse is describing the bewilderment of the jiva. So Lord Kapila says that seeing Prakriti, the jiva who is situated in Prakriti immediately comes in contact with the bewildering power of Prakriti and forgets his own swarup, his own spiritual identity, because of the function of avidya, gyan guyaya. Gyan guyaya means ones that covers one knowledge. So this is the first step in material creation, that the jiva forgets its own identity. So it's variously known as avidya, it's known as tamas, but this is the first necessary step, because if the jiva continues to remember its identity, it will never be able to exist in the material world. So when the jiva descends into the material world, then the first thing that is done is that it comes under the influence of this feature of Prakriti, the avidya feature of Prakriti, that makes it forgets its own identity. So Prabhupada says that in the previous verse, the word Leelaya means for the pastimes of the Lord. So one might think that, sometimes this point is also made, that this whole material world is created by the Lord for his pastimes. And everybody in this material world, good, bad, or ugly, is in their own way assisting the pastimes of the Lord. In whatever they are doing, they are assisting the pastimes of the Lord. And then Prabhupada says that no, the pastimes of the Lord here is his desire to rectify the convoluted mentality of the conditioned soul. So it's like there is an institution where there are sick people, and then a doctor comes in there and then works with them to cure them. Now, one cannot say that that institution has been set up for the doctor's pleasure. Even though the doctor is coming on his own volition, there's nobody forcing the doctor to come in, and the doctor does enjoy the act that he's doing, helping other people. So there is some enjoyment on the part of the doctor also, otherwise they would not be there. But at the same time, because these two facts are there, one cannot make the statement that this mental or this institution or these people have been incarcerated or hospitalized for the pleasure of the of the of the doctor. So Prabhupada makes this point in the purport. He says that it is repeatedly said in the Katha Upanishad that the Supreme Personality of the Godhead is never affected by the influence of material nature. I wasn't able to find this verse, so if anybody can find it, they could send it to me. But Srila Prabhupada makes this point that even when Krishna is in the material world, he is not off the material world. Just like when the doctor is in the institution, he is not a patient. He's never a patient. So simply by seeing the presence of the Lord amongst the jivas, one cannot equate the status of both of them. Later, Prabhupada says that in the Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 7th chapter, the living entities are illusioned by the material energy. In the Vedas also it is stated that the eternal living entities are covered by different modes, and that they are tricolored, red, white, and blue living entities. So this is the Shvetashvatar Upanishad 4.6. So this is talking about the fact that the jivas are while they are in the material world, they are tricolored by the modes, but not the Lord, who is always transcendental to them. Verse 6. Evam para vidhayanena kartavam prakrate puman karmasu kriyamaneshu guneratmani manyate. Because of his forgetfulness, the transcendental living entity accepts the influence of material energy as his field of activities. And thus actuated, he wrongly applies the activities to himself. So even in a conditioned state, the jiva is conscious. The symptom of the soul is consciousness. In a liberated stage, it is Krishna consciousness. And in a conditioned state, it is something other than Krishna consciousness. It is some form of material consciousness. So this verse is describing the material consciousness of a conditioned jiva. That the symptom of the material consciousness is that the activities that are done by the jiva in this consciousness are accepted by him as self-actuated, which means that he considers himself as the doer of the activities. So there is a verse in Bhagavad Gita that describes this: Prakriti kriyamanani gunakarmani sarvasha ahankara vimodatma karta ahamiti manyate. So this is essentially describing that point over here. So essentially, when the jiva is identifying itself with matter, so it identifies not only its body but its self with matter. So it's not that it thinks that I'm surrounded with matter or my body is matter, but it actually thinks that I am matter. So this is described as para abhidyanena. So because of this para abhidyanena, one begins to think oneself as the doer of activities such as seeing or manipulating the things around. which are actually being done by the gunas, Prakriti Kriyamanani. Vishwanath Chakravarti comments here, it's a bit of a, maybe there are some philosophers that use this line of discussion. I was not familiar with it, but he says that he talks about Shakti Veshavatars over here. So Shakti Veshavatars are jivas that are empowered with the energy of Krishna. Shakti Veshavtar is like Srila Vyasadeva, Narad Muni, Parshuram, they're Shakti Veshavtar. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that they don't come in this category. So because of the impossibility of identifying oneself without a sense of I, those who are empowered incarnation of the Lord, they also develop they also have this sense of I. However, their sense of I is different. Their sense of I adheres to that of the Swarup of the soul. And therefore, it is not a cause of bondage. He said this should be understood in the case of personalities such as Kumaras, who identify themselves as spirit souls. In the Paramatma Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami explains, this is in Anuchhed 29, that the cause of this misidentification is the rebellious independence of the soul from Krishna. And this is, of course, something that we have often discussed, that when the soul thinks that I will not act for your benefit, and this is your meaning Krishna, I will only act for my benefit. So when it begins to think I will act for my benefit, then the orientation of the I-ness changes. Instead of I being an eternal servant of Krishna, I becomes the supreme enjoyer. So he's trying to explain the causality of this change of orientation. And Prabhupada, so this is Bhurijan Prabhu commenting on it, that this goes back to the question of the fall of the jiva. How does this occur and why does it occur? So we are kind of backtracking. Lord Kapila here is speaking about the fact that a conditioned jiva thinks himself to be the doer. Take one step back. The reason the conditioned jiva thinks himself to be the doer and the enjoyer, because its sense of I is material. Take one step back further. The sense of I is material because the jiva has developed a mentality of being rebellious to Krishna. Take one step back. Why does it develop a mentality rebellious to Krishna? So this is the question of the fall of the jiva. And Bhurijan Prabhu says that Prabhupada addresses this in the purport of Bhagavad Gita 13:20. Actually, the living entity is originally the spiritual part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, but due to his rebellious nature, he is conditioned with material nature. It really does not matter how these living entities or superior entities of the Supreme Lord have come in contact with material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead knows, however, how and why this actually took place. So what is the answer to the fall of the jiva? Prabhupada says that it does not matter. Only the Lord knows, the Supreme Lord knows why that, how and why that that happens. But otherwise, he says it really does not matter how these living entities came in contact with the material nature. But even though that does not matter, what matters is that the jiva can escape from this clutches of Maya. And in the purport to this verse, Prabhupada says that the living entity is the cause of his own suffering. But he can also be the cause of his own eternal happiness when he engages in bhakti. So both the jivas are cause. Both the acts the jiva is cause of. The cause of fall and the cause of rising back to his position. Why the fall happened, Prabhupada says, does not matter. But why and how the return can happen, that has been explained in great details and continues to be explained. And that is what is most important. Verse 7. Tadasya samsritir bandha paratantrayam cha tatkritam bhavatya karturishasya sakshina nirvatatmanaha. Material consciousness is the cause of one's conditioned life, in which the conditions are enforced upon the living entity by the material energy. Although the spirit does not do anything and is transcendental to such activities, he is thus affected by conditioned life. So the conception of being the jiva considers himself as the doer, whereas actually he is not the doer, since he's only witnessing the activities that are performed by the material nature. But this conception of saying that I am the doer is actually the cause of his bondage. And again, this is a concept explained in Bhagavad Gita in great details. That it is because of karma, because of considering yourself the doer, that karma comes. And karma is the cause of bondage. In this verse, the jiva is addressed as Ishasya. He says that Tat Kratam Bhavati Akartuha Ishasya. So Isha is generally a term that is reserved to address the Lord. Ishavasyam idam sarvam yakincha jaktam. But just like Purusha is applied to both, the Lord and the Jiva, Atma is applied to both the Lord and the Jiva. Isha can also be applied to both. To both. So even though the Jiva is subservient to the Lord, because of his Isha mentality, that I am the doer, I am the enjoyer, he creates bondage for himself. So though his Swarup is Nirvitra Atmana, which is that of complete happiness, he becomes subject to samsriti, which is birth and death, because of the mentality of being the doer and the enjoyer. So Prabhupada in this purport talks about the Mayavadis, that the Mayavadis misuse the word lila to indicate that even the jiva is a lila of the Lord. That when the Lord wants to do lila, he becomes a jiva. which he says is the most dangerous interpretation. And the reason Prabhupada, so everything that Prabhupada writes is for a purpose, even though he does not call it out specifically. But the reason he writes this in the purport is because he wants to make sure that people do not misinterpret the word Isha. That is used here to say that, aha, look, in the Bhagavatam, the Jiva is addressed as Isha, which means that even the Bhagavatam is accepting the fact that the Jiva is the Lord. So the previous three verses, 5, 6, and 7, they summarize the Jiva's interaction with Prakriti. In verse 5, we saw that how the Jiva, seeing the various forms offered by Prakriti, becomes bewildered. And that bewilderment is avidya, jnana ghuyaya, or that which covers its knowledge. So verse 5 talks about the bewilderment of the Jiva. Verse 6 talks about what does the bewildered Jiva do. So the bewildered Jiva thinks himself to be the doer of the activities. And verse 7 talks about the consequence of this. It says that this misconception leads to the Jiva's repeated birth and death. So Lord Kapila is developing this nature of the interaction with the material world. Verse 5, that bewildered by Jiva. Verse 6, consider themselves to be the doer. Verse 7, suffers the consequence of their consideration, which is the cycle of samsara, of repeated birth and death. Verse 8, Karya karan kartratve karanam prakritim viduhu bhoktratve sukham dukhanam purusham prakrite param. The cause of the conditioned soul's material body and senses, and the senses presiding deity, the demigods, is the material nature. This is understood by learned men. The feeling of happiness and distress of the soul, who is transcendental by nature, are caused by the spirit soul himself. So previously we saw the sequence of the Jiva being bewildered and considering himself the doer and getting trapped in the cycle of birth and death. Now, this verse describes the material existence of the conditioned soul. So the bondage, as we know, is created by the actions of the jivas, karma, basically. The cause of the action and the results is Prakriti and the Supreme Lord. Because the action is, so now Lord Kapila is explaining, and remember this is Sankhya, so he tries to explain things in an analytical way. So how can you say that Prakriti is the cause of the action? So he says that any action is accomplished by the cooperation of the body, the senses, and the presiding deities of the senses. And this he will explain later on. Now, right now he's saying you accept it, that Prakriti is the cause of all three. It's the cause of the body, it is the cause of the senses, and it is the cause of the deities that preside on the senses. So because all of Jiva's actions are performed by the body, senses, and the deities, and Prakriti is the cause of them, you can understand that Prakriti is the cause of the actions of the Jivas. Now, what about the results of the action? So there he says that it is only the Supreme Lord who bestows the results of all action. How do we know that? Because the results of the actions are determined by the law of karma. And the law of karma has been established by the Supreme Lord. So if the Supreme Lord, so the law of karma is intricate, but it is essentially a set of rules that if you give $10 in charity in the mode of goodness, you get $10,000 back. Now, it could, instead of $10,000, the Lord could have said, you will get $50,000 back. And that's how much you will get. Or he could have said, you will get $20 back. That's how much you would get. But essentially, what you get is established by the law of karma, which is coming from the Lord. So the actions are being done by Prakriti and the results are being awarded by the Lord. And Prabhupada, he further expands on it, saying that one should not think that because the actions are coming from the Lord, he is implicated. He is simply responding to the good and bad activities of the Jiva. And there's this verse, Nadate kaschit papam nacheva prakritim vidum. I forget the third line. Nadate kaschit papam nacheva vikritim vidum. Fourth line is Tena Muhanti Jantavaha. So same point is made here that the Lord is not responsible for the good and bad. The Tena Muhanti ji, that only when the person is bewildered, he thinks the Lord is responsible. So the Lord is responsible but not responsible at the same time. And this we have said that the Lord has established the rules, but then the Jiva invokes those rules. The example that Srila Prabhupada uses always is that of the judge, that the judge, he may pass a severe sentence on a criminal, but he's simply following the rules. He's not involved in it. So the word Purusham, and because the word Purusham also contextually means enjoyer. Vishwanath Chakravarti translates Purusham to Jiva. Srila Prabhupada translates Purusham to the personality of Godhead. So in summary, the cause of the Jiva's action is Prakriti, because Prakriti is the cause of the Jiva's body and senses and the deities controlling the senses. The cause of the result of the Jiva's action is Purusha, which is either considered to be the Jiva and or the personality of Godhead. So one can understand it in three ways, that the cause of the action, the results of the action is the Jiva himself, or it is the Lord himself, or it is both of them. So one can say it is the Jiva because of the free will of the Jiva. One can say it is the Lord because he has established how does the activity get rewarded or punished. And it can be considered as both because the Jiva acts out of his free will and then the Lord awards the results based on the rules of karma. But because ultimately the free will of the jiva is also coming from the Lord, the point that Srila Prabhupada makes is that ultimately it is the Lord who is bestowing these results. Okay, I'll do one more verse and then we'll pause for any discussion. Verse 9. Devahuti Ruvacha Prakrite Purushasyapi Lakshanam Purushottama Bruhi Karanayorasya Sada Satcha Yadatmakam. Devahuti said, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, kindly explain the characteristics of the Supreme Person and his energies. For both of these are the causes of this manifest and unmanifest creation. So in the previous verses, Kapila Muni has briefly described the conditioned souls, material nature, and the entanglement of the conditioned souls in material nature. Devotee is essentially going to be, or is asking in this verse for the Lord to expand upon this. How does this all happen? And in 6 verses, from 9 to 14, Lord Kapila will answer a part of this question. And then he will expand upon it. Basically, this question is the basis of the remaining chapter, the 26th chapter, which is essentially a summation of the process of the creation of the universe. It is it's essentially a response to this question. And this is the Lord's final description in the 3rd canto of the description of the creation process. So previously, it's already been described several times in different with different facets in chapter 5 and 6 and 8 and 10 and 12 and 20. It's been described in different facets. Sometimes it's described as Visarga, part of Visarga, part of Sarga, as specifically the creation of the Virat Rupa. In this chapter also, the Lord will describe part of it. He will describe Sarga. He will summarize Sarga. But if you were to string all these chapters together, then chapter 3 gives the most comprehensive description of the end-to-end process of creation. And then if you take these chapters and then combine them with the chapters in the 2nd canto, specifically chapters 5, 6, and 10, then you get an even more detailed description of the process of creation. So Prabhupada in the purport says that after understanding the position of the conditioned soul in relation to material nature, Devahuti wants to know how nature works under the direction of the Lord and what is the relationship between the material nature and the Lord. In other words, she wants to learn the characteristics of the Supreme Lord in relation to the material world. And the verse, there's word Sat and Asat is used. So Sat is permanent and Asat is temporary. So Prabhupada says the cosmic manifestation is Asat. It does not exist. But the material energy of the Lord is Sat, or ever existing. So in this context that Prabhupada is using the word exist, it should be understood to be equating to permanent and temporary. So Asat is that it is temporary, because obviously the cosmic manifestation exists. Prabhupada says that many times, that the material world is real but temporary. But when he says asat, he's talking about, so we are in this universe at this point of time, but we know that this universe will get destroyed. So it is asat. But the energy of the Lord that is sustaining all this, creating, sustaining, destroying, that is ever existing. So that is Sat. Prabhupada says an analogy may be made within the mother, within the father and the mother. The mother and the father exist, but sometimes the mother begets children. So this is again in the context of the creation of the material world. That Purusha and Prakriti come together, and then the universe exists. And then after some time, the universe ceases to exist, but the parents continue to exist. So the Lord is existing, but the manifestation of the universe is temporary. So that is why it is called Asat. Okay, let me pause here, see if you have any discussion. Okay, if not, then we can continue on to the verse 10. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Yatta Trigunam Avyaktam Nityam Sadasad Atmakam Pradhanam Prakritim Prahu Avishesham Visheshava. The Supreme Personality of God had said, the unmanifested eternal combination of the three modes is the cause of the manifested state and is called Pradhan. It is called Prakriti when in the manifested stage of existence. So now Lord Kapila is describing the process of creation. So it begins with the unmanifested eternal combination of the three modes, which is called Pradhan. When it is manifested, it is called Prakriti. Now, in the 26th chapter is one of the few places, or actually it's the only place, where Prakriti is described as a manifestation of Pradhan. Generally, what is described is Pradhan and Mahatattva. Prakriti is an intermediate stage that comes in the description by MIHE, by the Mayapur Institute. They give this analogy to understand this a little bit better, that one can understand that Pradhan is like a woman, like a wife. When the wife is carrying a child, it could be considered as Prakriti. When she has delivered the child, then it is considered as Mahatattva. So that intermediate stage, it is a transient state. And almost everywhere else, even in the Bhagavatam, even in the Brahma Samhita, Chaitanya Charitamrita, they don't talk about Prakriti. You won't see Prakriti coming. They're only talking about Pradhan and Mahatattva. But here, Lord Kapila, he is talking about Prakriti to talk about that intermediate state. So it's not that the other scriptures don't talk about this stage, They do talk about the stage, but they don't call it by a separate name. They simply call it Mahatattva. So they say the Pradhan is converted to Mahatattva. What Lord Kapila is saying is Pradhan gets converted to Mahatattva, which gets converted to Pradhan gets converted to Prakriti, which gets converted to Mahatattva. So it's like saying that my wife had a child, which is an accurate statement. Or you could say my wife was pregnant and then she had a child, which is again an accurate statement with greater details. So here the focus is on a little bit of more details. So the reason I'm stressing on this is because it is a potential area of confusion that only over here we'll see Prakriti and nowhere else. And sometimes we try to make the mapping, what maps to map to what. So then we should just understand that in this 26th chapter, slightly more attention is given to the intermediate state of Prakriti. So right after Pradhan, which is the unmanifest stage, is Prakriti. So the condition of the material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called Pradhan. So Pradhan is also described as Brahman, which is mixed with the three qualities of goodness, passion, and ignorance, resulting in material expansion, which is sometimes called Sagun Brahman, and which contains 25 elements. So I'm quoting from the purport of Srila Prabhupada from verses. So this is from verse 15 that appears later on. And the first part is actually the purport from this very verse. Prabhupada is using to describe Pradhan. The Pradhan is the primal, most subtle manifestation of matter. So in addition to Pradhan, as I mentioned, the verse also gives us the characteristics of Prakriti. And there are different ways this verse is interpreted. All these can be considered to be characteristics of Pradhan. They can also be considered to be the unique characteristics of gunas in order to distinguish it from the preceding and the succeeding stages of Pradhan. So the aggregate of the three gunas is the Lord's external energy or Maya. So this manifests in stages, various stages, and is called Avyaktam, Pradhanam, and Prakriti. It is called Avyakt or invisible because it has an invisible stage. This is, so Avyakta is when it is present in Pradhan. It is there, but it is not there. It is there by its presence. It is not there because it is inactive. All the gunas are balanced in the Pradhan, which is called Sagun Brahman also. It is called Prakriti because it is the cause of all causes, because it is the cause of the Mahatattva, and the Mahatattva is the cause of the creation. It is eternal since it remains as the final cause even after the destruction of the universe. So the sequence that can be established from here is there is the Nirgun Brahman, which is the Lord's effulgence. When this is influenced by the Lord's external energy, it becomes Sagun Brahman, which is also known as Avyakta. And that becomes, or that can also be considered as Pradhan. And then Pradhan gets converted to Prakriti and Prakriti to Mahatattva. So Srila Prabhupada, in the purport, he gives an elaborate understanding of Pradhan. He says it is called Pradhan, or Pradhan also means chief, because it is the best amongst all partial forms, which are its effects. It is called best because it is the cause. Just like if X is the cause of Y, X is considered better to be Y. Because if X did not exist, Y will not exist. But the opposite is not true. If Y did not exist, X can still exist. So if you go back the chain, then everything is, the existence of everything is predicated on Pradhan. So that is why it is the best. And Prabhupada says amongst all partial forms, because there are complete forms of the Lord behind the Pradhan. But amongst the partial forms, it is the best. Then he says it is the subtle, undifferentiated sum total of all material elements. So everything is present in the Pradhan, but you can see nothing in it. So the example that is given is that from the soil, there comes trees which have leaves and branches and fruits. So they're all coming from the soil. But if you were to dig into the soil, you won't find the tree. So the tree is coming from the soil, but the soil does not contain the tree, because the tree is present in a subtle, undifferentiated form. So all the elements are coming from the Pradhan, but the Pradhan does not contain anything. When the total material elements are manifested by the interaction of the three modes of material nature, that manifestation is called Prakriti. So this is the intermediate stage that I was talking about. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifested, avyakta, the reaction of the total elements are not taking place, that stage is called Pradhan. So this is distinguishing Pradhan and Prakriti. The nature of Pradhan is that it is Nitya. It is eternal. So eternality over here, it requires a little bit of understanding that we are saying that Pradhan gets converted and then we are saying it's eternal also. So there, one way to understand is that just like the soil continues to live within the tree, so the soil never gets destroyed. It just changes form. And of course, the tree gets destroyed, but the tree goes back to the soil. So the soil doesn't ever get destroyed. So in the same way, even though the Pradhan is going through all the transformations, it continues to exist. Okay. Now, what the Pradhan is not, the Pradhan is not Brahman. Sometimes people will confuse with Brahman. So we are saying it is Sagun Brahman, but not Brahman. Because Brahman is, there are no modes of material nature in the Pradhan, in the Brahman, but there is in the Pradhan. Even though they are inactive, but nevertheless they are there. Then Pradhan is not time. Because wherever there is time, there is changes. And there are no changes in the Pradhan. So Pradhan is not time. And then Pradhan is not, or does not contain Jiva. Because again, where there are Jivas, then the modes will be in flux. So because the modes are in balance, one can understand that there is no Jiva within Pradhan. Vishwanath Chakravarti explains Pradhan in yet another way. He says that what is indescribable, called Pradhan, because it is superior, is also called Prakriti. So he considers them to be the same. Though consisting of three modes, it is avyakta. It is invisible. Though it is composed of cause and effect, sadasad, it is eternal. Though it is seen as temporary things such as earth and has varieties such as Mahatattva, it is also without variety when in the condition of balanced gunas. What possesses variety as substance becomes invisible without variety in another form. In the purport, Prabhupada writes that Pradhan is neither Brahma nor time nor Jiva, but it is the subtle, undifferentiated sum total of all material elements. When the Brahman is mixed with the three qualities of goodness, passion, and ignorance, there results the material expansion, which is sometimes called Sagun Brahman, and which consists of these 25 elements. In the Nirgun Brahman, there is no material contamination, or in the spiritual world, the three modes of material nature are not present. When Nirgun Brahman is found, simply unalloyed goodness prevails. Sagun Brahman is described in Sankhya system of philosophy as consisting of 25 elements, including the time factor. Okay, so this was the description of Pradhan. And if you want, I can pause over here because it's a little bit involved. See if anybody has any questions on it.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I do not have a question on Pradhan, Prabhuji, but I have a question on Jiva being the, partial, marginal energy of the Lord, like because Jiva being conscious, and generally we refer energy is not conscious, energy and energetic in that context we use. So how should we understand Jiva as an marginal energy, Prabhuji? If you can share a little more elaboration.
So several times when the Lord's energies are described, they're also described in terms of there is a personality that is manifesting that energy. So like we say, internal energy of Krishna, right? And the enjoying energy of Krishna, that's Srimati Radharani. And Radharani is definitely conscious. Or we say external energy of Krishna, and we say Maya Devi, and she is definitely conscious. So when we say that Maya Devi is the external energy of Krishna, or Srimati Radharani is the internal energy of Krishna, so we can understand that these are the personalities that embody that energy of the Lord. So similarly, the Tathastha energy, the marginal energy, is embodied by the by the Jiva. It's kind of like you say that the king has a commander in chief, like so that is the king's ruling potency, by which he rules or by which he subdues his enemy. And then there is a person that is embodying it, or persons who are embodying it. So that's how we can understand this correlation.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Prabhu, I just have one question, just clarification. You said which one has 25 elements? Is it not? The Pradhan does not have time in it, right? And time is also one of the element, or?
So the Pradhan has 24 elements. Prakriti has 25 elements.
Oh, okay. Okay, Prabhu, thank you.
Okay. Okay. So I think it's a good question, which actually is a segue into the next verse, which is describing the composition of Pradhan. So 326:11. Panchabi Brahma Chaturbir Dasabis Tatha Etas Chaturvimakshitakam Ganam Pradhanikam Vidu. The aggregate elements, namely the 5 gross elements, the 5 subtle elements, the 4 internal senses, the 5 senses for gathering knowledge, and the 5 outward organs of action are known as Pradhan. So this verse is talking about the composition of the Pradhan, Pradhanikam. And the elements are enumerated in order to speak of their characteristics. So they are described as Chatur Panchams. So 4 sets of 5 and Chatur, 1 set of 4. So 4 sets of 5 is 20 and 1 set of 4 is 4. So that's how we have 24 elements. And the verse says that Panchabir Brahma, that these are worshipped as Brahman. Now, the Brahman here, of course, is the Sagun Brahman that is being spoken about. So in the purport, Prabhupada says that according to Bhagavad Gita, the sum total of the 24 elements described herein is called Yonir Mahad Brahma. So this is Yonir Mahad Brahma. This is chapter 14. Chapter 14, right? Chapter 14, verse 3, I think. The sum total of the living entities is impregnated into this Yonir Mahad Brahma. And they are born in different forms. So these 24 elements will be further described in the subsequent 3 verses, 12, 13, and 14. So for now, follow Lord Kapila's sequence. That first he has introduced. So for now, we'll keep Prakriti aside. Prakriti is a confusing part. And even though it's been spoken, let's keep it aside. Let's start from Brahman. So we had Nirgun Brahman by the influence of the modes of material nature. We had Sagun Brahman, which is Pradhan. So now we are beginning our discussion from Pradhan. So last verse spoke about the characteristics of Pradhan. It is subtle, everything is in balance, everything is undifferentiated, and it is eternal. It is the cause of the whole material creation. So we now in our mind, we know what Pradhan is. Now the question, of course, is that if the Pradhan is undifferentiated, how can we say it has 24 elements? And the understanding is that this is spoken with an eye to the future differentiation of the Pradhan. That the Pradhan will eventually divide itself into these 24 elements. Or putting it the other way around, these 24 elements are present in an undifferentiated way within the Pradhan. Okay, so now we have an understanding of Pradhan. We are now looking at what these 24 elements are in the 3 verses. But we understand these 24 elements are Chatur Panchams and Chatur, 4 5s and a 4. So that is going to be described. Verse 12. Mahabhutani Pancheva Bhurapo Agnirmaro Nabha Tanmatra Nichatavanti Gandhadini Matrani Me. There are 5 gross elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And there are 5 subtle elements: smell, taste, color, touch, and sound. So, of the Chatur Panchams, 2 fives are spoken over here. The Pancha Mahabhutas, which is earth, water, fire, air, ether, and the 5 Tanmatras, which is the smell, taste, color or sight, touch, and sound. So, these 2 are closely linked to each other. That earth has the quality of smell, water has the quality of taste, fire has the quality of color, air has the quality of touch, and ether has the quality of sound. So these Panch Mahabhutas have this Panch Tanmatra. And actually later on we'll see that it's actually the other way around. That because of these 5 Tanmatras, the Panch Mahabhutas come. That because the Lord wanted to manifest sound, ether came into existence. Because he wanted to manifest touch, air came into existence. So we tend to look at it from a different way, that because there is earth, there is smell. But actually, it is that because the Lord wanted to manifest the quality of smell, earth came into existence. But these are essentially the 10 elements of the 24. Okay, verse 30. Indrani dasha shrotram tvadragrasannanashikaha vakarau charanau medram payurdasham uchyate. The senses for acquiring knowledge and the organ for action number 10, namely the auditory sense, the sense of taste, the tactile sense, the sense of sight, and the sense of smell. And the active organs for speaking, working, traveling, generating, and evacuating. So this speaks about the next 10. So it speaks about the 5 Gyanindriyas and the 5 Karmendriyas. So previously we saw that there were 5 Tanmatras. So for each of the Tanmatras, there is a Gyanindriya. So because of sound, there is the sense of hearing. Prabhupada calls it the auditory sense. Because water has the taste, there is tongue. Because air has form, there is skin. Because the light has color, Prabhupada uses there, we have the sense of sight. So in this way, we have the 5 Gyanindriyas that interact with the 5 Tanmatras of the 5 Mahabhutas. And then there are the 5 Karmendriyas that are used to manipulate these 5 dhatus. We have the 5 bhutas, earth, water, fire, air, ether. And in order to manipulate it, we have the hands, legs, tongue, anus, and genitals. So now we are at 20. So we have counted 20 elements. Verse 14. Mano buddhi ahankaras chitamityantaratmakam chaturda lakshate bhedo vritya lakshan rupaya. The internal subtle senses are experienced as having 4 aspects in the shape of mind, intelligence, ego, and contaminated consciousness. Distinction between them can be made only by different functions, since they represent different characteristics. So these are known as the four antahkaranas. They are the four internal subtle senses. So the first is chitta. So chitta is, the closest explanation of chitta is awareness or consciousness. It's the most subtle. That because of chitta, the soul experiences. It experiences itself. It experiences that which is around it. If the chitta is not there, then nothing will work. So it's the most subtle, the sense of awareness. Then there is ahankar. Ahankar is the sense of self. And at least in the pradhan, it is ahankar, meaning it is the sense of the false sense of self or the false ego. Then there is mana, which is the mind, and there is buddhi, which is intelligence. So the mana, it stores information, and the buddhi discriminates based upon the information that has been stored by the mind. So if you eat some food and then you find it's very tasty, then the mind will store this. That a mango is very, 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 very tasty, but on the other hand, a chili is very hot. So the mind will store it. So the next time somebody gives you a mango, then the buddhi will turn to the mind. Mind will say, yes, I know. We have eaten this mango before and it's very tasty. So then the buddhi does the function of acceptance and rejection. So it will look at it and say, okay, previous data indicates that it is good, so I'll take the mango, but not the green chili. So buddhi does not have any, it does not have any historical perspective. It only analyzes in the present. And the mind does not have any analyzing perspective. It just keeps the historical perspective. And then Srila Prabhupada says that distinction, or rather Lord Kapila says, distinction between them can be made only by their functions. Which means that previously we could have said that this is earth, this is water, this is eye, this is skin. We could put a finger on it. But because these senses are subtle, you can't put your finger on chit or ahankar or even on mana and buddhi. The brain kind of does something, but obviously it's only a part of it. So he's saying that only by their function can this distinction be made. Vritya lakshana rupeya. Okay. So so I have a table over here. I know I haven't sent it to you, which basically analyzes the composition of the pradhan based on the verses 3:26:10 to 14. And it talks about the 24 elements of the pradhan and the characteristics of the pradhan. So I'll send that to you. I'll do one more verse, and then after that we'll stop for any discussion. Verse 15. Etavaneva sankhyato brahmana sa gunasya cha sanivisho maya prokto yah kala pancha vimashakaha All these are considered the qualified Brahman. The mixing element, which is known as time, is counted as the 25th element. So from verses 15 to 18, the characteristics of time are given. So when Lord Kapila is saying all these are considered the qualified Brahman, he is referring to the previous set of verses which are describing the Pradhan, which we have also understood to be the same as Sagun Brahman. So that's why he says Brahmanasa Gunasya, that these are the Brahman that is Sagun with the guna. Now he's talking about the 25th element. Now time is not present in Pradhan. So at this point, he's talking about that which gets added on to the Pradhan as the mixing element. Sometimes Pradhan is described as the mixing rod, that a Pradhan is sitting in a cauldron, and then time is the rod that kind of mixes it. So when the element of time enters into Pradhan, it gets converted into Mahatattva. Or if you're considering the finer conversions, it first gets converted to Prakriti and then into Mahatattva. So Srila Prabhupada in the purport says, according to the Vedic version, there is no existence beyond Brahman. Sarvam Khalva Idam Brahma. This is Chandogya Upanishad 3.14.1. It is stated also in the Vishnu Puran that whatever we see is Parasya Brahmana Shakti. Everything is an expansion of the energy of the Supreme Absolute Truth, Brahman. When Brahman is mixed with the three qualities of goodness, passion, and ignorance, there results the material expansion, which is sometimes called Sagun Brahman, and which consists of these 25 elements. In the Nirgun Brahman, where there is no material contamination, or in the spiritual world, the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are not present. Where Nirgun Brahman is found, simple unalloyed goodness prevails. Sagun Brahman is described by the Sankhya system of philosophy as considering of 25 elements, including the time factor, past, present, and future. So the description of the Sagun Brahman extends because even though we are saying that Prakriti gets converted to Pradhan gets converted to Prakriti, which gets converted to Mahatattva, they are all in the category of Sagun Brahman, because the main feature distinguishing Brahman, this from Nirgun Brahman, is the gunas, the fact that the gunas appear in it. So Prabhupada talks about the fact that the gunas are not present in the spiritual world, but they are present in the material world. That is one of the primary distinguishing characteristics. Okay, so I'll pause over here, and if there is any discussion, we can see if there's any questions or discussion.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Just a question about consciousness, contaminated consciousness being one of the elements of the Pradhan that we just saw. I thought the consciousness is akin to conscious, that is soul. The soul is conscious and the consciousness is characteristics of the soul. So, but here the consciousness is given as a separate element in the Pradhan, as a contaminated consciousness. Is it something different from the consciousness of the soul per se?
Same understanding that you apply. So when we talk about when we talk about senses, right? When we talk about senses like the ability to see or hear, they don't really have an existence separate from the soul. What does it mean to say that there are the 5 Gyanendriyas and the 5 Karmendriyas? It does not mean that there is a hand and a leg in the Pradhan, or there are eyes and ears in the Pradhan. So for the sake of for the sake of the fluidity of the recitation, they don't expand it completely when they say. So when they say that there is the sense of sight, so one should understand what it means is that which enables the jiva to see is there in the pradhan. That which enables the jiva to hear is there in the pradhan. So that which enables consciousness in the jiva is there in the pradhan. So it would be burdensome to keep saying that over and over again. So basically the point is made is that the sense of sight is over there, the sense of smell is over there. But as you're rightly pointing out, all these are characteristics of the soul. It's the soul who sees, it's the soul who hears. And in the pradhan, we already said there is no soul. Jiva is not there, it comes later on there. So when all these qualities are mentioned, then it is mentioned in the context of their enabling feature. So when the conditioned jiva descends to the universe and it needs to see, then that ability to see is coming from the pradhan. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes. Thank you. And I also appreciate very much the clear definition of Pradhan, Prakriti, and Mahatattva. I was in a very cloudy situation for me. So now it's very clear. And thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Because without your guidance, it would be hard to understand that there is no time factor in Pradhan. Because Bhagavatam, it doesn't say there is no time factor as such in that word. It says that the 15th verse, it says a mixing element. Time factor comes as a mixing element. We wouldn't be able to catch that subtlety. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Prabhu. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions? Okay, if not, then we'll pause over here and we'll resume next week. As I mentioned that we will once again cover all this in an end-to-end way. So later on, it becomes a little bit more complicated there. But of course, we'll try and address it there. But we'll cover it again as just focused on a discussion that is just focused on the whole aspect of the creation of the universe, the composition, the steps that happen there. Okay, so we'll end here. Vancha kalpatarubhayasya kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Anant Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Thai Gaur Premananda. All glories to the Sun. Hare Krishna. Thank you.